Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hi friends, welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called The Picture Book Publication Process. And joining me on the show to cover this topic is Sandra Sutter. Hi Sandra.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good today. Nice rainy morning.
Perfect. I'm so excited to have you on the show to chat all about picture books. But first, can you share with the listeners a little about yourself and your journey in publishing?
Sure. Actually, I this is kind of my third career. I was once a addictions counselor and then an attorney, and then I started writing books of my own and had two traditionally published picture books, and just kind of started thinking about how I wanted to do things and my role in the publishing world. And I just felt like being a publisher was a better fit for me. I'm just a natural kind of mediator person that puts things together behind the scenes, actor. So I researched it a lot and learned a lot about my own journey as well, and put those all together and decided to open Gnome Road Publishing.
Such a great story, and I would love to hear the story behind the name of Gnome Road Publishing. I know it's a great one, so can you share with the listeners?
Yes, I love when people ask me about this because it's an actual place. Gnome Road is in the mountains of northern Colorado in a place called Red Feather Lakes, which is a town. And there's a little lane, road. Some call it Elf Lane, some call it Gnome Road. And it's just basically a very short dirt road that has granite boulders and trees all alongside of it. And people have gone and put little fairies and elves and gnomes hidden and sometimes just outright in the trees or standing there on the side of the road, that people can go look at and explore and take pictures of. So, yeah, that's where it came from. I thought it was a great idea. It's a place I spent a lot of time in the Red Feathers region when I was a kid. So I wanted something that just had that magical feeling.
I know, I love it too. And just looking at, the kind of books you publish, picture books, when you see the name Gnome Road Publishing, like it gives the vibes. Like you nailed the vibes too.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think it just stands for itself.
Perfect. So let's chat about picture books. So let's start first on the craft side of things for authors who maybe want to begin to write picture books, or maybe they've been writing picture books for a bit and want to improve their skills. What is some advice you have when it comes to actually crafting a picture book story or narrative that will appeal to publishers?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is I I would take some type of course that helps you at least identify how to write for this audience. Writing for children, they're a completely different audience than adults. And even though there's some basic elements to storytelling, there's formats that work with kids. And obviously, we have a much smaller amount of space to write. So we want to learn the craft of doing that. But also, I think one of the most important things people can do when they're writing is get critique groups and critique partners. It doesn't have to be big groups or anything like that, but finding other people who you trust to read your work and give you honest feedback. Some people maybe are too honest, maybe a little brutal, and that might not feel good. So finding those who are maybe more gentle, if that's your speed, or maybe the ones who are more straightforward, if that works for you. It doesn't really matter. Just find those people that you feel you can trust, and then start working with them to get the words you have on paper polished to a point where you feel you can submit it.
I love the advice to work with critique partners because that's important for any kind of writer. And the reason is because in your head, you know what you're trying to say. And when you look at the words on the page, you think you know what's there because you have this very clear vision in your head. But it's always super, super important to get that outside perspective to help point out things and allow you to strengthen things in your manuscript that you might not have noticed without that outside perspective.
Absolutely. And critique partners sometimes just one comment, even one word will make you start thinking in a different direction that ends up really making the story shine. And it's not necessarily their words, but they signal something inside of you that goes off in a direction that really helps you get the story exactly where you wanted it. You just didn't know it yet. And there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing with critiques is that I've heard this said quite a few times and I've experienced it myself where it's not always necessarily exactly what the person's saying. But for example, like if there's a part of the story where they're just not really getting it and they're pointing out like something here just isn't working, you don't necessarily need them to tell you exactly what's not working. Just simply knowing like something here isn't right will allow you to really zero in on that spot and so just sometimes knowing like the vibes in certain spots, or if someone makes a suggestion that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, that could make your mind go down a different path that does resonate and fit your vision. But knowing something was pointed out in that certain part of the story will allow you to focus in on that aspect of the story.
Yes. And the other thing that comes up is that sometimes we hold on to something in our manuscripts that we think is just perfect. It's the cornerstone of the whole story, but it's actually just our darling, right? It's the thing we want in there. And sometimes critique partners are able to let you get to a point where you can let it go because it's not working for the story. And it might work for another story and you put it in there, but they'll help you get over that feeling that you don't want to get rid of it. And you do. And then the story smooths out and it's right. So it can be adding things, it can also be taking away things. It can be revising them into different formats, all kinds of things. But critique partners, I think, are one of the most important things we can have as writers.
Yeah, absolutely. And golden tip here, kind of tied into what you said. If you delete something from a manuscript, put it in a document or put it in a note in your phone or something. Never completely delete because you never know what you can use down the road.
Yeah, and you still have it. So it's not like you totally got rid of it, you just got rid of it for that story.
Exactly. Perfect. So now let's chat about marketing aspect of, picture books. So when authors write picture books, their goal is to sell it. Their goal is to have this story explored by kids. And so the way the market is now, can you please speak to any kind of, not necessarily trends because those change all the time, but in general, what is the market searching for when it comes to picture books?
Well, I think marketing is one of the most difficult things to really take on and understand, even as a publisher, not just as an author, because it's multifaceted and there's a lot going on, and sales have somewhat to do with trends and what people want in the moment, but they also have a lot to do with um, getting reviews and getting in front of the right audiences and librarians and teachers and parents and all kinds of people. So marketing, I sit down with my authors before the book is coming out, authors and illustrators. When I say author, I really mean both creatives or author illustrators together. So we're looking at how do we get in front of the audiences who want to know about this, which ultimately is the kids, but there's gatekeepers to the kids purchasing these books. And since most of us have been in the kidlit world a while, I know that we're going to be able to at least get it in front of other authors and illustrators and some teachers and librarians that are in the kidlit world. But we're always looking at, and I always say, what can we do to get it outside the kidlit world so it's in the front of new audiences and people that we maybe just didn't even know about the book and now they do and they really want it. So it's a hard um thing to stay on top of and a hard thing to be able to capture it all. But I think anytime you can just do the next step, where can I look now? Where can I go now? you're never going to hit everything and everybody, but maybe you can go find the right avenues to tell people about the book and that it's out there. And I'm not sure I'm answering all of your question here, but I'm trying my best because it's such a big topic.
No, for sure. Absolutely. I think you did great answering that. Perfect. So now let's chat about when you receive submissions. Before we dive into specifics of your own wish list, in general, what are things that come up in submissions that make you go, maybe this is not ready to be sent out, or could have been a stronger pitch package? Let's start there. What are typical things you see in submissions that make you want to pass or think that they could be strengthened?
Oh, definitely the first thing, especially as a small publisher, we are not going to take 10 of of the same theme. So I don't want my books competing with each other. I want them complementing each other. So a lot of times if people will submit to me something that I already have or that's coming out and they haven't necessarily researched what does this publisher have? They think, "Oh, you have this book about chickens, so you must love chickens." And they send me chicken books. And I'm like, "But I already have chicken books." Like it's it's maybe not researching well what it is we're looking for. Of course, you can't know the individual editor's specific likes or dislikes unless they tell you. But you can know a little bit about what their tastes are and what they've taken in the past and maybe what similar themes that they might be interested in but not be spot on with something they already have. So I see this a lot and I even say on our submissions thing, please take a look at what we are already publishing and what's in the works before you submit because if I'm passing on it, chances are we already have something similar. Like that's it. As far as craft goes, and I think editors and publishers have different feelings about this, but I really do like to see a good query letter. It doesn't need to be something that is, 6, 7 paragraphs long and you tell me everything about it. But I want to know that the person has looked at Gnome Road. They believe their manuscript's a good fit for whatever reason. Share that. Um, I do like comp titles only because it tells me a little bit about not necessarily where it's going to go in the market, but also what the author is thinking this book should be like. It's part of their vision, as far as I'm concerned. I'm getting an idea of their vision. And then I like to know a little bit about the author or illustrator in a final paragraph, just so I understand where they're coming from and that they're pretty serious about it. So if I don't see a query that's somewhat developed, it's like, here, take my look at it. That I don't really like that very much if there's nothing there.
Yeah, a lot of great information. Also, you said something about comp titles that I've never heard before, which is so interesting. We hear a lot, especially from agents, with, querying them like, oh, the comp titles show where your book fits into the market, which is exactly right. And you mentioned that too. But I love how you mentioned, I never heard this before, about it's showing the author's vision as well. I think that's a super interesting perspective that I'm sure the listeners as well found interesting too, because we don't hear that often, but I think it does, especially with picture books. There's so many different kinds of them. And when authors are pitching their manuscript and they have others that show like similar themes or tones or just writing style, illustration style, whatever, it really does give a snapshot very quickly of not only how your story fits into the market, but what other books are similar to it in terms of just the writing itself and the way the book is put together.
Yeah, it really does give me somewhat of an idea on what they're trying to convey to me in the story, itself, and then what it might be. Sometimes, especially, I can tell on humorous tones as well, and I love humor, so I'll be like, yeah, that's a pretty funny book, and it does fit, and I can kind of get an idea what this person what's going on inside their mind, and without even meeting them. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So you did mention you like humor, which is a perfect transition into things that you absolutely would love to see in your inbox. So can you give a little glimpse into your wish list?
Yeah, well, right now we're about full for our 2027 list. But when we are accepting submissions, it's there's always going to be something humorous every year, in each list. I love humor. I think kids love humor, and that's really where it's driven from. I watch my own kids and other kids really react to books that are funny, and it can be nonfiction books. It can be, books about advocacy. It can be books about um, their favorite stuffy. You name it. The topic doesn't really matter, but when you deliver it with humor, I think you can really hook kids. And so I'm big on finding those, but at the same time, I like to balance that list, and I can't have all humorous books. So I look for lyrical things as well. Something that I think touches maybe the quieter side, because there's a lot of children out there that they resonate with that. And I'm really looking at how do I reach all readers? They don't have to love every Gnome Road book, but I want all of the readers to at least love one. And I'm really big on like science and math, STEAM. Uh, and I prefer informational fiction rather than like biographies or straight up nonfiction, unless it's narrative, lyrical nonfiction. I do really like that. Something like Trunk Goes Thunk, uh, which came out last fall, I think is a good example of that lyrical nonfiction sweet spot. Um, and then combining humor with some of those is always a plus.
Amazing, perfect. So, say you get a manuscript in your inbox, you absolutely love it, and you would like to publish it. What are some other things you do before actually offering publication? Do you do any research on the author, have a call with the author? Can you give some insight into that?
Part of it depends on how it came into my inbox. I do always research the author, it's social media, of course. And some authors and illustrators out there, I already know from having been in the business myself for a while. So I'm familiar with them. I know a little bit about them. Or I've had sometimes people will win like meet with the publisher for 30 minutes and have a chat. And so some of them I've met before in different ways. Others I'm researching. If they have an agent, agents are usually kind of the person in between. So I don't usually meet with the author illustrator until I've already contracted for the book when an agent's involved. That's not always the case, but sometimes. If they don't have an agent, I usually start with a a Zoom meeting, and we discuss what they like about the story, their vision, what I'm thinking for it. And most of the time, I would probably make an offer at that point in time or tell them I was making an offer. Uh, It's possible I might just wait and see because I'm not sure it's exactly the best fit. And I just wanted some more information. But most of the time, I'm setting up the meeting because I'm planning to make an offer.
That's perfect. So you make your offer, they accept, and they're super, super excited. Then you dive into getting this book ready. So I'm super interested to hear about combining the story with the illustration. So you said some of your authors are author illustrators, and then you have authors that work with illustrators. So can you give some insight into creating this perfect balance and teamwork effort of making the story perfectly pair up with the illustrations?
I think that's my favorite part of this whole job. Really, it is. And I tell people this a lot because I love finding just the right person for a manuscript to illustrate it. When I don't already have an author illustrator, I've and I love working with author illustrators who most of the time they're illustrators first, and then the story comes with it. And so I kind of help make sure the story is developed and it's where it needs to be. But that's just kind of a different compartment, I should say, than I compartmentalize it in my head. How I work than when I'm working with the author who doesn't already have an illustrator. So I love pairing up them. And I'm very visual. So when I read a manuscript, this might help answer an earlier question too, but when I read a manuscript on submission, if I don't have a pretty immediate visual response to it, that would be a no because it means I can't quite figure out how I want to do the book. And it doesn't mean that the manuscript's not good. It just means I don't have the visual for it. And that's a good indication it's not the right one for me. But the ones where I immediately just I can see it happening in my head, I know those for me are a good fit. And so I start looking at illustrators out there that I think have that vision and the characters kind of in my head that I see. But I also sit down with the author and we have a discussion. I give them ideas on where to look at illustrators. I want them to go through the illustrators I've worked with, agents I've worked with their illustrators. I kind of start there and go out from that kind of center circle out. And I get their feedback on what they're looking at too, that as far as the authors, before I actually make contact with the illustrators or the illustrator agents.
That's super interesting. I think this really gives a snapshot into the importance of relationships and past connections. And I think it's really important for authors and illustrators and everyone in the industry to recognize that, once you're published or once you're with an agent and in that space of making connections with others in the industry, like that can definitely work in your favor. Because if an illustrator worked on one of your books and they happen to fit the vision of a book that landed in your submissions, then it's a good chance that they will be the one to illustrate this one as well.
That's absolutely right. And um, for illustrators that have agents with other illustrators, I start with that agency. They're one of my first ones I look at is that agency and other people in the agency because I've worked with these agents before. And I can't say enough about these hardworking agents, as you know, out there that I've met and they reach out and we start working together on a different project. And I'm pretty loyal. I go back and look at the people I've worked with before and see what they have. So I often find new artists from the same agencies that I've already worked with.
That's super interesting. I love that so much. So, just to kind of wrap up on the end of this chat before I ask you my fun question, what are some final thoughts you'd like to share about the publication process for picture books from when you see it in your inbox and love it to when it hits shelves?
I think everyone says this about the industry. Patience is important. And it's for everyone. I mean, me too. I want things to hurry up. I'm doing submissions to trade reviews, and I'm like, come on, come on, come on. Are we going to get one? Yeah. And so we all have to practice patience at each stage of it. And also, as you just mentioned, remembering those relationships that you're building, and you never know when something is going to come back again. And don't necessarily lose hope or feel your feelings, but move on from them and realize that tomorrow's another day. There are new things ahead, and every little step you take each day will help serve that foundation for what's coming later.
Absolutely perfect. What a great note to end on. And this brings us to the plot twist where I get to ask you a totally fun and random question you couldn't have seen coming. so,
Okay.
so speaking of picture books, if you could travel back to the past and have a conversation with a picture book author who is no longer with us, who would you choose and what is one question you would ask them?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have this favorite. I mean, I have to look up. I'm not even thinking of the author because you put me on the spot, of course, and I'm not even thinking of. But there is a book called "This Room Is Mine," and it actually was my. It was a book that my grandparents had when I was little, and I think it was in the '60s, and my dad had it. And I think I've mentioned this book before, and it was about these two little girls, an older sister and a younger sister, who shared a room. And they were, of course, arguing over the space, having to share it. And me being the younger sister, I think I really identified with the character in the book because they divide it with a jump rope. And lo and behold, the older sister has access to the door and can leave. And the younger sister cannot. She's stuck in her room forever. She imagines being stuck in her room forever, And the illustrations they have where she's imagining having to get all of her food and everything by pulling up like a little basket through the window, and she's got like a horse in it and all kinds of things in this basket. And I would love to know. I mean, this is way back in the 60s. Like, what did this person have an older sibling? Was it something, maybe they had a child and they are two children that were doing this, and what possessed them to put the horse in the basket? I I would like to know. It's I just have always loved it. I was fascinated with the illustrations and just I just love the basket scene and what made them think of it. It was just great.
Love it. I have never heard of that one, and that sounds fantastic. So everyone go check that out. And Sandra, it was such a joy having you on the show. Can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online and learn more about Gnome Road?
No, absolutely. It's so difficult. Go to gnomeroadpublishing.com and it has all of our information there. And we're on various social media sites. It's not hard to find us there. It's usually under at Gnome Road Pub or Gnome Road Publishing. So we're around, and I'm always happy to hear from people. If you've got questions, send it into info@gnomeroadpublishing.com and we'd be happy to answer.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you asking to have me on and find out a little bit more. And this has been a great experience.
Yeah, it was such a joy having you. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this chapter of the show with Sandra, all about the picture book publication process. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in publishing who you think would enjoy the show, please pass it along to them. Thanks for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.